Ready? Would you rather have 50 duck-sized horses, or one horse-sized duck?
Dude, this was the quickest internet search for like icebreaker questions I've ever seen. So I put this question on our door in our clubhouse.
Did you really?
This past season. So we would do a question of the day, break up, just something different, just to get guys talking, like you get into the clubhouse, like every day is the same. And we would put a question up every day. And this was honestly the first question that I came up with. I think I did an internet search just like you did. So,
Well, what's the answer?
I'm going with the horses.
Dude,
I got size 13s.
Yeah, okay.
I can stomp some horses, man. Duck-sized horses.
Yeah.
A monster duck, though, that's a mismatch. It's a mismatch.
Oh, would you rather have everyone know you'd be able to read your thoughts, or for everyone to know you have access to your internet history?
Oh, man.
You're giving up your thoughts, or you're giving up your internet
bad
history?
either way. You don't want to know either side of this. I think I'm pretty. I say what's on my mind anyway, so let's just go with the thoughts. I think they're already out there.
Okay. Would you rather be telepathic or telekinetic?
Telekinetic. Save my hands, man.
Be able to move stuff.
I work with my hands. If I can move with my mind, I'm good to go.
I don't know. Telepathic is pretty cool.
You need that Atlas moved? It's done.
Your wife needs you to do something?
Yeah.
Done. You know what? Actually, I'll take that one too.
Yeah. Save the monos.
All right. This was one for me. Would you rather swim in a pool full of Nutella or a pool full of maple syrup?
Maple syrup's too much, too strong. Nutella, this Irish complexion, it might help me out a little, absorb some of that. Yeah, a little bit of that tan. I'll stick with the Nutella.
That's good. That's good.
That's a good one.
I thought it was pretty good too. So then, the question that I often get, working in both basketball and soccer,
sure,
is would you rather work in basketball or work in pro soccer? And then, the other question I always get is, well, would you rather work in another sport? And so you working in the MLB, for me, is a great opportunity. Hey, would I rather work in that sport?
Right.
So for you, what comes to mind is the schedule. Right. So the first thing that I think about, what's the lifestyle and schedule like outside or with the sport? So for baseball, what does a game day look like?
All right. So yeah, if the question's would you rather work in another sport? No, I love baseball. However, we get jealous. We talk all the time. We'll meet on the road. I love talking to people from other sports, by the way. We get so caught in your own world, and you recycle a lot of the same stuff over and over. So it's refreshing to talk with someone that works in the NBA or the NFL or whatnot, just to compare and contrast. And once we hear of the schedule, we're hearing guys complain, they got an off day, oh, you had a morning workout. Oh, that's tough. We play every day, 162 games a year. So the sport itself, I love working with the guys. I think growing up playing baseball, just already having kind of a background in that, it was very easy to walk into a baseball clubhouse and feel like you didn't skip a beat. I didn't need to learn anything about the sport. It was very easy for me. I think the nature of the player, there's a different vibe to every sports clubhouse. I'd spent some time in the NHL with the Coyotes guys for a little bit. And those guys are maniacs. They're tackling people over the. I'm like, wait, are you gonna hurt him tonight? You can't play. If you bash this guy's head against the hydrocollator. But just the nature of the sport, those guys are wild men. I think hockey would be the other sport I'd want to work in. I think that baseball, just the nature of the closed elements of the sport, the repetitive nature of pitching, of hitting. I can put my mind in just trying to correct movement patterns, really kind of fine tuning the Ferraris, if you will, before they get on the field. I love that element. But the schedule, the day to day, that's probably the trickiest part. The 162 is a grind. That word gets overused a ton, but embrace the grind. But honestly, the cool thing about it is you have a redo every day. You're not sitting. It's not the NFL where I'm sitting on a loss or a bad performance for a week to redeem yourself. You can spit on it, come back the next day and start anew. So I think being able to have that is kind of refreshing in a way. You get into some pretty good routines too. Your every day feels very similar because every day is the same. You show up at the ballpark. For a home game, we'll get in 11 o'clock. I'll get a workout in just for my own sake. Maybe a sauna, cold tub, something like that, just to get ready to go. Players start coming in 12:30, 1 o'clock. If somebody's got something hey, woke up with a kink in my neck, my back's stiff today, those guys usually show up early. If we have our rehab guys at home, they'll come in early and get started. So you kind of have like 4 waves. It's funny that you don't have, working like the clinic life for 5 years, which I did before I started in pro sports, was like, all right, you got your set schedule, you know what's coming in, when it's coming in. There's like this nature in sport where you never know what can come in the clubhouse, right? Like you're just sitting there. It's kind of like the calm before the storm. Anything can happen, So you're always a little bit on your toes. It's kind of good for you, especially if you are somebody that wants certainty or is uncomfortable with uncertainty. It's kind of a challenge to kind of, all right, chill. We'll take it as it comes, But there's like 4 waves. So it'll start off. You'll get the wave in the morning. Guys will go out, throw, do their conditioning, lift. Kind of settles down. You can go in, study, do whatever you need to. Then there's another wave that will usually hit again of treatment, pre-BP. Then you'll have BP. Then there'll be another wave that comes in after BP for any pre-game stuff. A lot more kind of trainer-specific maintenance, pre-game stuff, and then the game goes on. Obviously, you'll have some treatments during the game. So a lot of times I'll spend my first half of the game in the clubhouse with like our relievers, getting those guys ready to go for the night. And then at the end of the game, you'll always have some things that trickle in at the end of the game, either to get eval or checked out, or hey, do we need to just touch base with this tomorrow? So it's this ebb and flow constantly of the day, and it's over probably 12 hours. You show up at 11, you probably leave 11 at night. So it's a long day, but like the amount of work that you put in I would say is half of that. But you always are on your toes a little bit, which is kind of fun. Some cool challenges to it.
And you say a point that I have noticed working in other sports too, is you're there for a lot during the day because you're there during the team practice too. You're there during film session or whatever it may be, and like you're not necessarily, like you said, you're not necessarily doing clinical work, PT
right.
work, but like you're there as part of the team. And I think that sometimes that's the fun part about it too. Like
for
kind
sure.
of breaks up the day, but it's also I think there's this misconception about, I'm gonna go work in pro sports and I'm just gonna treat all day. It's like, man, you probably aren't doing that for, like you said, maybe even only half the day.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the little bit that I've seen that's fairly common. You have your pieces where you get your busy time. You don't. I think in sports there's so many opportunities to kind of create your own niche, if you will. Like you can kind of dive down a lot of different ways and things you want to look into. Like even though your role is, you're a physical therapist, like I always laugh because I'll talk to friends back home, like I don't even feel like I do physical therapy anymore. Even just sport to sport, it's a different job. I hate even calling myself that because the role, even team to team, and what their PTs demand of them are different. Like some teams will have their PTs only work with their injured players or guys that are on the IL. I travel with the team. I'm kind of part of the training staff. We all sort of we pride ourselves in versatility and the ability to pick each other up and be a team. So it's like if I'm busy, locked up with my hands on somebody, it's like if someone needs something, they can go to anybody on our team and we can all fill in, which is some of the beauty of that is you always know like somebody else has your back. Where, other places you might be the only guy able to do a certain thing, or this player only works with this guy, So I think there's a commonality amongst our group where we've kind of grown up in a lot of the same methodology, if you will, but I think we preach versatility and having a lot of tools. I think if you have a lot of depth, it's great, but when that depth runs out, or if you need the guy doesn't respond to that, you need to have some width to you, and you have to be able to go a lot of different ways. Like in a clinic setting, if this is what I do, they already walked in the door, they're already kind of sold, they're sold on what you do. And if they don't like what you do, they leave and they don't come back. And as PT, you probably thought you got them better in a day. Most likely they just didn't come back. But with our guys, it's like you have to find a way to build trust. You have to find a way to form a relationship, because I'm going to see that guy again the next day and again the next day and again the next day. And if you don't have something for him, or you don't have tools in your toolbox to meet those demands, you're in for a tough go. You're going to be banging your head against the wall. So being able to have multiple people, I guess that's my point, is like having multiple people with different skills, and like, hey, all right, after I finish here, why don't you go over, let's take a look at this, and you're going to go over with Ryan and go see Dip after that and jump on the AccuScope with Junko. Like we have a team that can kind of hit it from every angle, which is cool.
That's really cool. And
yeah.
That's like the exciting part about working in sports,
Absolutely.
right? It's like you can, because like in an outpatient world or a clinic setting or the Gen Pop, like what you just described that happened probably in a matter of 30 minutes working with those 4 individuals could take 6 weeks for someone on the outside, like trying to get in with different practitioners at different times. I think that's the exciting part about working in sport. one thing you said, working in sport too, is you kind of get to develop your own niche.
Yeah.
Right. And like for me, the thing that's always fascinating about baseball, and you said this earlier too, is the nature of the close skill of baseball, that being pitching and hitting. So like it's always an interest whenever we get together to talk about this with you, because you're always diving deeper to further like evaluate and see like what can we do more for pitching and hitting. So if we start from ground zero and think about the history of some of the research that's gone into some of the biomechanics or the reason why we wanted to look at those things, like where does that start?
Yeah, it's a great question. This has taken, we've made huge strides in this realm in the past 5 years. I do a ton of work with like kinematics, so just study of motion. Really, the technology started to meet it or get to the point where we're able to really, I think, look in a lot of things with way more depth. So we're able to look at timing of peak pelvic velocities, timing of peak trunk velocities relative to one another. We're able to look at things outside of just joint positions at certain phases in the kinematic sequence. So I think those things are still great. I think a lot of the research that's been done, like the stuff that's been done by Glenn Fleisig, ASMI, some of the things that were probably started around in the 90s, looking at pitching biomechanics, if you will, it's great. And a lot of it still holds true. But I think where we get in trouble is, okay, we find these things like we define what a late arm is, a late shoulder, or an early arm, or this guy's an early trunk rotator or whatnot. And it's like, well, the fix isn't, hey, I want you to take your arm and instead of being at 10 degrees at front foot contact, I want you to be at 50 degrees. It's like, that's not the fix. Oftentimes the fix is something earlier in the chain that broke down. So I still think that stuff's useful as an assessment where we can maybe take some of those points in time along the sequence, kind of those attractor states. So if you look at front foot contact or max external rotation or release, see where certain joint positions are at, and then work backwards and go, okay, we found this, and this. This guy's got a late arm, a late pelvis. Maybe he's got a little bit too much contralateral tilt at release, probably as a compensation for his inability to get to his front side. Like, how do we reverse engineer that now and help clean up the movement if that's desired? And so I think having something that analyzes the kinematics is great, but I think where the real work comes in is, all right, what do we do about it? I think every coach has an idea what someone looks like and what their opinion is on what that guy needs to do better. But it's like, well, how do we fix it? I think that's where the world of skill acquisition and motor learning has really kind of started to come to the forefront in sport. We have a full department now that actually focuses with that and works with the coaches and kind of blends in some of the constraint-led approaches and things like that in with some of the more sport-specific drill work. So it's been kind of cool to be in the midst of that and see that take shape. But it's not a one-man job. I think a lot of the work that I've done more on the amateur side is looking at trying to develop systems with looking at movement, like starting with what I explained, starting with understanding the kinematic sequence. What are the things that we don't like? What are some risk factors that this guy shows? And are those concerning? Sometimes you see 2 risk factors, like, so what? Like, we're trying to catch kind of the red flag stuff, those guys on the fringe. Like, we don't want to ding everybody just because they show a couple faults. Everybody's going to have that. And sometimes those faults are the reason these guys are good. Like, these guys are high performers, and when we talk about good movement, I kind of laugh. I'm like, what is good movement? Like, good movement is it gets the job done on the field, right, or on the court. Like some of the dysfunctional things that people do or compensations that we see are half the reason they might be deceptive. So like, do we always want to change that stuff? Do we want our hitter having all this relative motion in his back hip as he loads his hip? Like, not always, because there's a time constraint to that, and like, I think what we perceive as, oh, this guy moves really well. Like, so what? Like, sometimes some of the guys that you look at and they're ugly movers, those are some of your better performers. It's very muddy when you start working with human beings. So to say that it's down to a science we're way off. I think that we have an idea of what we want to see. We have some faults that we want to kind of find and maybe weed out the fringe guys. And then after that, I think it's like, all right, let's keep this kind of thing kind of funneled right here and just take off the outliers. But I don't want to get too much in the weeds with some of the processes that we have with that. As far as breaking down hitters and pitchers, the hitting things, I think a little more a little more messy just because there's a little more variability to it. Pitch locations, things like that are going to change your swing. But pitchers I always joke with our pitchers. I'm like, you guys are golfers, man. They're like, what do you mean? We're high level athletes. I'm like, dude, you're not a high level athlete. You're a very skilled athlete. You're not a high level athlete. They'd hate me if they heard me say that, but they are the golfers. They're trying to repeat a movement pattern, over and over. And the better guys have been shown, like some of the studies that we've done, like the best guys with command have the smallest amount of variance when they hit those attractor points. Like they're within this tiny little level of like where their pelvis is at, and they can almost hit it dead on every single time. So there's definitely I think there's a place where movement and performance can meet. Like some of the studies that have been done and some of the work that we've done internally looking at timing of, say, like timing your hip shoulder separation, or timing your trunk rotation, like delaying your trunk. We would consider those guys good movers, and also there's been some links like, oh, these things are linked to velocity as well. So I think at times there's a marriage between that with what we consider good movement, and we're always looking for that. But in a lot of places, like, do I want an athlete running down the track with a bunch of relative motion in his hips? I want that guy to be able to free some degrees of freedom and put force through the ground, So some of the stuff that we like to see as a good mover, it's doesn't always translate. Sorry if that's messy, but
that was gold, because there were so many points that you just hit on that resonate with me, and I want to dive deeper on a few of them, because like the first thing that you talked about was, do we even want to change what you're seeing from a movement perspective? Because I think from the outside looking in, like you said, there may be this ideal sense of like, oh, this is what movement should be. This is how much internal rotation of a shoulder you may have, or this is what your posture should be, right? Like how often do we say, oh, good posture versus bad posture? Mm-hmm. And like you hit on the point of sometimes let's just stay on the topic of posture. Sometimes that posture is what makes them successful. And the reality, like I think the notion that an athlete that is a high performer is also healthy, I think they're dichotomous. I don't think that they can be synchronous at times, but I think in order to be, like you said, in order to be a high performer, like a pitcher, probably not going to have too much range of motion at a hip, or too much or your range of motion be very, very specific. Whereas if over a long term, you think about like a healthy individual, you probably want a little bit more motion there, a little bit more quote unquote variability is the buzzword that people like to use. Mm-hmm. So it's like it's something that I think isn't talked about enough for those that aren't in this space. And like you said it perfectly, that when do you decide to change that? And so like I kind of put that question back on you, like how do you decide as a practitioner when you do want to intervene on, let's just say, posture or movement, especially in the context of pitching because it's a closed skill task, versus letting it be and kind of just managing the symptoms as they come up?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. We get that a lot because those are the buzzwords. And as clinicians, we want to fix things. We want to find things to fix. It's what we do. So it's like, it's like, oh man, I got this hammer. I need a nail to pound. It's like we always want to try to address that stuff. And sometimes you got to step back and be like, man, like, is there an ideal movement? Like I was way more convicted when I was younger at thinking I knew, like, you should be like this, you should move like this. And now I know nothing. Like people ask me questions, they're like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what it should look like. I don't think there is a way it should look. Adding performance into the mix just adds such another component to this that you have to step back and be like, man, this game is bigger than what I'm doing in the training room. Our players aren't there to get worked on in the training room. They're here to perform, right? Number one. And so like performance is what they get paid for. They're there to win. Let's face it. Like they're there to win. Staying on the court does help with that. And so like, when do you step in? I think that if you're performing well and you're healthy, I don't touch that. We have like guys that come over and you see something you want to clean up and you're like, no, let's watch it for a little while. Not to say you're going to be lazy and kind of just like not do your job, but at the same time, like I want to see why this guy's good and really get to know this guy and see what he can do. Because like I said, some of the quote unquote dysfunctional patterns are the reasons that they're deceptive. They're the reasons that I can create a 20-inch vertical movement on a fastball. Like the contralateral tilt I get because I can't get to my front side maybe helps me So like, do I change it? Not necessarily. I think for us, we always are like looking to keep this thing kind of like, we look at it like taking the emergency brake off your car. Like, I don't want you driving around the block with the e-brake on, so I'll do enough stuff to take that off. But at the same time, like, I just want to keep this car sort of running in this safe zone so you're not running into the red. You know, when your temp starts cooking too hot, like, I want to bring them down every day, be able to kind of keep them in this zone to where they can function. And then when they go play the game and they rev that system up, I fully expect it to come back in the next day and have to probably put it back in that same green zone again. I use the term like tuning a Ferrari. These guys are Ferraris. Like, they're high performers, and there's like, Ferraris take a lot of work. They take a lot of maintenance, but it's as good of a sports car as you can find. So when I go run around the track 10 times, I want them to come into the pit. We might just need to make a couple fine tunes. Like, let's clean that hip. My back's a little stiff today. Man, I feel like I'm pulling off the ball. Like, is there a way that I can clean up my thoracic rotation? Like, yeah, we can do some work there and kind of keep you in this safe zone. And then I fully expect that rig to be revved right back up during the game, and it's probably going to come back in the next day with a lot of similar areas. But how much is enough? Like, how much do we do? More isn't always better. I was just talking with one of our young players, a really highly touted outfielder that we have, that he's like, yeah, whenever I was like chasing more internal rotation in my hip, like, everyone said I needed more hip internal rotation. There's like, everyone thinks you need more IR in your hip. And I'm like, great, but like, what does that do to you at the plate? And he's like, I just felt too loose. I didn't feel like I was on time. I didn't feel like I had the thump that I had. And I was like, perfect. Like, how much do you need? I don't know, enough. Let's not touch it until you need it. So you want to be proactive all the time, and you want to kind of stay on top of things and clean up good posture, if you will. But I want someone to function to where they're not having to cheat through things, but their body's their body. Like, when I see an unstable foot now, or a foot that is a pronated foot, I used to be like, oh my gosh, I need to clean that up. I'm like, no, that's their way of like finding the ground. That's the strategy they've used to get that first met on the ground to drive propulsion. And so like, they've created a strategy to do that, and our job is to manage it, not to change it. Dan Pfaff, I think, is the first person I heard say that. He's like, we don't change these guys, we manage them. I'm like, that's brilliant, because now I see that all the time. Like, yeah, I'm managing this guy, and I'm perfectly comfortable doing that now. I think that in our world, like I said, it's a different job. It is. We're not here to do rehab. These guys aren't here to do rehab. They're here to play. And so sometimes I think we take ourselves, we give ourselves too much credit and make ourselves more important than we need to be. It's like, no, we're part of this team, and we're here when we need you. And sometimes keeping it at that, I think, helps things flow way easier.
I'm going to throw a statement at you and let me know what you think. Sometimes doing your job is doing nothing.
Yeah. Sometimes less is more. It's addition by subtraction. I think, like I said, as clinicians, we want to do too much sometimes, and we want to change things. And even if it's just the words that you say, thoughts that you put in somebody's head. I see young clinicians all the time. Oh man, your mechanics, you need to, and it's like, dude, don't go there with that guy. Like, these guys are like, some of these guys, we think they're kind of like, they don't hear stuff in the stands, and they're just as fragile as any of us, and like, sometimes I'm like, don't even go there with that guy. Don't even put that in their head. Like, half the time we're treating their brain. That's my mentor that I work with, our director, Ken Crenshaw, is always like, don't treat the player, treat his brain. Like, you're not treating that injury. Quit worrying about what's going on at his shoulder. Treat his head. And that's half of the battle sometimes. It's like, you don't need to do that. Sometimes it's just a talk with the guy and just to reassure him, hey, you're okay. Because the guys start feeling like they play sometimes. It's like, you're going through a rough streak. Everything's hurting. You're winning, and success solves a lot. And so sometimes doing less, putting less in the head, giving them another thought of something they think is wrong with them is a good. It helps you in sport when you don't go that way. So, I don't know if you experience the same thing.
No, I do. No, what you're saying is things that I experience at the same time, and I think two thoughts come to mind of what you were just talking about. One, there's so much more to when you see these guys every day, and you really get to know them. You really get to see what makes them tick, and what like sets them off, and like vice versa, right? Understanding how to manage that, and understanding how to approach that situation, or let's just use an injury as an example. Your ability to approach that, understanding who's in front of you. And it sounds like, I think people may think, yeah, like, okay, have different languages to speak to someone. But to me, it's so much more in this space, because you're talking about their career, you're talking about their money, you're talking about their livelihood. They're a big part of their identity, right? These guys that get injured, their identity gets removed. Like, they can't do the thing that they have been doing for, God knows, 10, 15, 20 years in some cases. So what you're talking about is like Ken says, right? Treat the brain, not the injury. I that resonates with me because I think that's often a piece that's missed. And you alluded to like a young clinician maybe approaching that situation is thinking it strictly like from a PT or an S&C or an orthopedic perspective, but it's so much more than that. So like, where have you seen the young clinician fail or see some good clinicians come into the pro world space and not have success or fail in those moments?
Yeah, it's all out of good intention. Like everybody wants to help. Everybody wants to be a part of something and try to be, like I want to have an influence, and I think some guys come in too hot. They come in and try to hit a homer on the player every day, and I did this when I was young too. Like you want to do a good job. Everyone wants to do a good job. And sometimes doing a good job, it's like you have to look at it over like the long-term scale of this thing. Like sometimes it's you want to go in and hit singles. Like I want to go in and draw a walk with this guy and build some trust. And I think that some people come in too hot with something that is, they don't know the player for one. They don't know what makes that guy tick. You don't have an understanding of what this guy responds to, what he even likes. Some guys like soft tissue. Some guys want their neck manipulated. Some guys hate manipulation. Some guys just want to do extra. Some guys, if they have to do breathing, they're off the table in 2 seconds. Some guys love it. Everyone, it ticks so differently. So I think number one, guys come in without understanding who's on the table and getting to know them without drawing the walk. Like for me, one thing that's always helped is like be able to, if you want to draw a walk or hit a single, like I always felt like I could do a decent assessment on what was going on, try to get an understanding of a complaint or a something that's going on mechanically that they're feeling, be able to link that to what we think may be going on from a structural standpoint, and then start off with maybe my hands and soft tissue. I always felt like getting in, being able to put your hands on someone and make some changes. You're always like, players like, oh, I feel better. What else you got? It's kind of like a makeout session. It's like I'm not going and hitting a homer right out of the chute. Like you got to make out a little bit. You got to warm them up a little, And I think like having a little makeout session with the player is a good thing. You want to make him feel good to where he can stand up off the table, walk back to the table and be like, yeah, what else you got? And now they're open for something maybe that's like a little more, this a little different. Like, what are we doing? We're doing a little diaphragm activation. We're doing breathing. We're doing a little pelvic reposition. Like whatever it may be, I think they're more open to it when they know, one, that you can help them. Two, I think like when they know that you actually care about them. Because I think a lot of players, it's funny, they're jaded. I think a lot of people in professional sport, especially higher achievers, like everybody wants a piece of them, right? So I think a lot of guys come in and think like, what are you trying to get from me? Or are you trying to build yourself up by saying, oh, you helped me? There's a weird vibe at times that I've felt with players where they think you're out for yourself, and I think a lot of clinicians are. They're looking out for themselves. They're trying to boost themselves or use this name to promote their company or their business. And I think when players understand that you're about them and that you care about them, and they can feel that they start to trust you, and those makeout sessions can turn into more.
That is by far my favorite analogy that I've ever heard anyone say when it comes to like the whole buy-in process. Like I'm over here, I'm nodding my head, I'm like clapping inside my head, like, oh, he's got the home run, he's got the walk, he's got the singles, and take a 90-degree turn and we're making out.
Hey,
But it's brilliant though. But like it's context. It makes sense. Like what you're saying is, hey, you got to warm up to them, and like that's like I would share a similar sentiment in that. Trying to come in too hot, like you said, too hot. Trying to hit a home run. Trying to change too much. I think like where my mind comes to too is like where I see, whether it's a young clinician or a clinician trying to come into sports, it's not having an appreciation that the person you're working with, let's just say it's a 25-year-old player. They've been maybe a professional athlete 3-4 years, nothing long, but they've been in it, had a good college career, and this generation coming up has been probably training since they were 12, 13 years old. They probably have a decade worth of training, rehab experience to come in and think what you're going to bring to the table is going to be the secret sauce without even asking them, hey, like, what works for you? What have you done?
Totally.
What have you done for yourself that makes sense?
Yep.
And that's like one fail that I often see, that mistake. Like, did you ask them?
Yep.
Like, what do they need? Like, I think you were a Ted Lasso fan? I always come back to Ted Lasso.
I've never seen it.
Oh, my Lanta, you need to see this.
All right.
Okay, anyways, so long story short, like there's this scene in Ted Lasso where the coach, they're trying out this new formation, and they're like arguing in the back office, like, oh, should we stick to this formation or not? And like one of the coaches goes, just go ask the players, like, is it working or not? So like to bring it full circle,
Yeah.
it's so important to make sure that they have a voice in their own care. Although like we spend so much time in our craft learning and studying, like you said, like you take these courses, you have your mentors, you learn, you try to tweak and do what you need, but at the end of the day it comes back like, hey, here's what I'm thinking. Do you think it's going to work for you? Let's see if it works for you. Like you said,
Yeah.
try a few things and have some buy-in.
You nailed it. It brought another point. Like this day and age, there's so much information out there that we don't necessarily need to have the answers anymore. Like, I don't think that we're the coaches and therapists in professional sport don't need to be the content people anymore. Not to say that that's like, oh, hands off. Sometimes they come to us so you can put them in the right hands. And I think like, I saw Ken do this really well too. He was always like, what do you got going on? He knows personalities. Like, I know this guy might respond really well working with Nate digging in his subscap. So he's going to send him into Nate. Or he knows who's going to respond to who. So he'll put people in the right hands, or, oh, you should go see this guy. He doesn't have to be the one to make the change, but he pointed them in the right direction and put them in the right hands, right? Or, you know where you can find some great information on this? It puts the ball in their court. Like, oh, you have a tendinopathy. You know where you can find some great information? Let's go read some of Keith Barr's work. Or like, you can give them the content that they can go now look into. Now they feel like, wow, they're actually part of the care in controlling this. And now they're like, oh, I trust this guy. He's looking out for me and he's not trying to be the one to fix it. And then what happens, you get that double in return. Hey, what else you got? What else you got? You know, and then it's almost like you earn trust by not being the one that has the answers, but just pointing them in the right direction or putting them in the right hands to care about them. Because then they get the feeling like, oh man, like you don't have an ego. You don't have to be the guy. You just cared about me right there. It's funny what you get in return for that, and then the respect that you can get in return from a player. And I think that we want to be the one that fixes everything. And that's early on. That's a big mistake. I think even the people that have the capability to do it, sometimes when they come from that place, it doesn't go well. And you see, like you said, there's great clinicians that they come in too hot. They want to fix everything without really understanding the guy, and they fail and they get pushed out the door. And then you see guys that like so skill set, but they honestly have those skills and they last a lifetime. And people, they'll still call them weekly and ask for their advice on things. It's just because they trust them. You know, and I think that foundational thing, like trust, it's hard to be found, and it's really hard to be found in pro sport where everybody wants a piece of you, and you've seen everything, you know, on earth as far as from a performance. And like these guys are going home and they're on their phone constantly digging at stuff. Hey, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? Have you seen this? Have you seen this technique? It's like, yes, maybe, and then it's like have a conversation with them, but they have to. You have to get to a certain point with the guy, I think, to be able to have success.
So you just started like you're showing your fake phone over here,
Yes.
trying to like, hey, like look at this, right? So like hear me out on this. Where you said we're inundated with information, right? And these guys are being asked for a lot from people that may be reaching out on social, email, whatever it may be, because like you said, someone wants to hitch a ride with them to potentially make their business grow or make their own personal brand grow. So how do you, this is something I struggle with, or maybe you just ignore it, how do you deal with the social media pundits, or how do you deal with those that are poking holes at, you know, an injury happens, and, you know, the injuries that we have in pro sports, they're pretty public knowledge because it's part of the world of sports betting. This stuff has to be public knowledge. So you get these folks that are kind of poking holes or making suggestions from afar saying, this is how you fix it, and they have this whole Instagram post or TikTok video of, here's how I would fix I don't know, this guy's Achilles rupture, you know, like here's how I fix this guy's hamstring strain. It's like,
Yep.
Okay, full circle. How do you deal with those, or how do you manage that internally?
It's everywhere. I do nothing with it. I laugh now. I found like the ability to just like, so what? Like I just take it now. Like they just don't know any better. And not to say they don't know what they're talking about, all of them. I'm sure there's a lot of great content that, yes, but you have no idea of the intangibles that go on. And as part of an athlete's care, these guys have agents, have a team of people sometimes that they rely on and lean on, and everybody's got a voice. The different pressures of having to perform, you know, like the one that comes to mind, I remember watching what Kevin Durant and his Achilles in the finals, and like everyone's bashing, like wanting to like poke holes at what should have happened and how this thing should have been managed. And I'm like, so you're going into the finals and Kevin Durant asks you for certain treatment. Are you going to tell him to go pound sand, or hey, you're not playing today, or like what, like these definitive like oh, this is the way I would have done it and this is the way they should have done it. It doesn't play out that way. I've heard people like, oh, if I had that, like I remember talking to somebody about back in the day. I remember Joe Mauer had a hip or low back or something. Oh, I would just take Joe Mauer and I put him in the sideline. I would get his hip internal rotation with this and this. I'm like, you have no idea. You don't even know Joe Mauer. He might tell you to beat it. Like the first day, you tell him to lay on your side and take a breath in through his nut. Like you just don't know. And I think people don't know what they're in for, and they don't understand the background and they don't understand the behind the scenes action that goes into a decision like that. And you got pressure from a GM. There's so many aspects like that we're trying to control that. It's probably for its own podcast, honestly, to go down that road. But I laugh at them. I don't take it personal anymore. Like somebody thinks they know a situation better than do. Okay, that doesn't bother me anymore. I used to get irritated with it because it's like you take it personal. But now I'm like, all right, I'm not attaching myself to it. They just don't know any better.
So it's unnecessary.
It's everywhere.
Stress.
It is.
Yeah, it's more than what we already need to deal with.
Yeah.
Right? There's so much more that goes on in our own space.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like the outside view. Hey, have your piece.
Yeah, and some of these guys, they're just trying to sell something. You know, they're trying to sell a business or make themselves. You know, it's like, fine, if that's what you got to do that, fine. But not for me. I'm not taking it on.
Oh, I hear that. Yeah, I'm with you. There's enough I got on my plate right now.
Yep.
You alluded to something here about GMs, agents, their own performance teams. I've seen a trend, an uptick in basketball, and then colleagues that I still have in soccer, they're seeing an uptick of your higher profile athletes, what I would label as a performance entourage, like surrounding themselves with people on the outside. And I think I look at it from one of two ways. One, the grass is green on the outside other than the team staff. Or two, the perspective I've had when I've asked some players about this is, hey, Adam, the reason I have people on the outside beyond y'all is because if I get traded, my continuity of care from you guys is done. And so I just try to make sure I always have someone in my corner that knows what's going on. Not saying I won't do what the team wants, but like I'm going to make sure I keep them in the loop, because if I move from team to team, like this day and age, like there's not the players that are staying with one team for 10, 12, 13, 14 years. It's a circus, right? So from your experience, have you ever had to deal with situations like that where you have the performance entourages, and if you have, how does that integrate with what you're trying to do with the athlete?
Yeah, great question. I've heard more stories with this in the NBA and the NFL than we have right now in Major League Baseball, but trying to put myself in a player's shoes, I understand. You know, I understand what you're talking about. You don't have the guys that are spending 15 years in one city where that's the only person they need to work with. And, performance and taking care of yourself it's so much more of a thing than it ever was years ago. Like that was the guys just come in the training room to hang out and drink a beer after the game and stick their knee in an ice bath and leave. You know, now there's just so much more that goes on with that. So I respect it and I get it. And I think the biggest thing and the way to deal with it is build a relationship. Don't fight it. Even if you disagree, like trying to ask questions just to understand where someone's coming from, as opposed to ask questions to poke holes in something, is gonna win out most of the time. What we've done in the past when we've had somebody else that they're seeing on the outside, bring them in. Like instead of like fighting it or them trying to hide it, like we want to embrace that and say like, yeah, cool, bring them in. It's like I want to see them, I want to meet them. If they have something good, awesome, maybe we can pick up some of it. That's how I look at it. I'm like, cool, you have something else you're doing that you love? Let's watch it and let's see if we can help you out with it, you know? Instead of trying to like fight this battle of us against them, to me it's like, let's embrace that to a sense. Now you don't want to make it a circus where you got a whole crew in there, but I think what it does is it gives the player a sense of, like I alluded to before, like you're actually interested in my care, and I'm not fighting your guy, you know? And so even if you have discrepancies, there's not one way to do things. You know, the longer I do this, the less convicted I am that there's a right way. You know, like it's like use the word should. I'm like, it should be. Really? Should it be? Like I've seen people get better from all types of care. I've seen people get better from Reiki, for God's sakes. Like I don't know anymore. Everybody has their brand, and at different times I think there's certain interventions that are going to be successful and certain that aren't. And for me, it's like let's bring them in. Let's learn from each other. Let's make them part of the team, and show the player that you're on their side. I think when they can do that, like as I alluded to before, you build trust with them, instead of fighting it. However, once you've built that trust, sometimes being able to have a conversation and go, I don't agree with this, and this is why, they're more willing to listen to you now, and they're like, oh, you actually disagree with. So you don't want to just be a yes man and, oh, everything's great. Like if there's something you agree with, now you can actually have a conversation about it or ask a question. Hey, why are you doing that? You know, you already have an anterior ankle impingement. Why are you sitting on that slant board jamming your ankle at end range that you already don't even have access to? You know, like let's have an actual talk about why that may not be helpful or why that might be pissing off your joint. And then give them some strategies to help that. You know, it's like, and then I think that we can have those conversations, and we've maybe built a relationship already with their guy that you can actually call them on the phone instead of trying to hide out and do it behind your back, because they're going to go see it regardless. Mm-hmm. They're going to find their care. They're going to get what they need, and that's cool. I don't take it personal anymore.
You're a rare one. You are a rare one, because not most people wouldn't take that approach. Like just my experience, most people would kind of, man, I don't want to do what they're doing. You know, like his way's wrong. Like man, I'm here in pro sports. Like I want to do it my way. I want to. This is, you know, I got to where I got to here. Like my thinking is the right thinking, and I think I've seen and heard of situations where, in the end, what ends up happening is there's just a fallout somewhere, and there's a blowout somewhere, and ultimately, if you bring it back to like why we're all here for player care, player health, like help them perform, it ends up hindering them. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, I think the phrase that comes to mind is like you are genuinely putting your ego aside and be like, hey, like I'm here to help. Let me know how I can. Like this is what I think. Like once we can have that trust, but ultimately, we're in this together, and it's a group decision, it's a group effort.
Totally, it's a team, man. Like we joined this thing to be part of a team. Yet there's so many people that don't want to be part of a team, right? Like if you want to work in pro sports, like you better be prepared for that.
Yeah.
If you're wanting to control everything and have it done your way, like you're going to be miserable. You're going to be miserable, and you're going to be fighting people constantly. It's like right when I remember starting this gig, I remember there's a quote. Maybe it was our strength coach Nate. He's like, "Hey, like I'm not going to do things like you all the time, but if it's 80% of what you think I would do, it's fine." I'm like, that's a great point. Like. Sometimes we think we give ourselves more importance than we really have. You know, we think we're making this bigger impact than we're really having. And there's like, sometimes there's a little piece and it's like, oh, cool, I don't matter. You know, not to say you're not like trying to make it, like, it probably comes off the wrong way, but like, if it somewhat aligns with the way you're thinking, it's probably going to be okay. Unless it's something blatantly like, no, you're going to wreck that guy. Like, then you're going to step in, obviously. But for the most part, like, just let things be a little bit and just form a team and be able to have those talks and kind of create a fertile ground to have a discussion about something at least. Because you come off like this right out of the chute, and now everyone's got their guard up. You know, so I don't know. Maybe it's just getting older.
Yeah, probably part of it. Probably lose the energy a little bit.
I don't know.
Yeah. You kind of get a little bit more calm, a little bit, you know, less bullish.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
you kind of start, you start to see some stuff, endure some stuff, and realize, man, okay, I'm really not as big as I thought it was.
Yeah, I think you come off that what the Dunning-Kruger, the curve where you're actually down in Mount Stoop and you're kind of crawling your way out, and you just start to realize like, oh, I was kind of an idiot, but I thought I was amazing. I thought I had all the answers.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know.
It sounds like the group that you're a part of with right now, and you can see it and you can hear it in your voice and the stories and the experiences you've had. You and the group over the D-backs are really invested into the culture and the team and building the things beyond just the X's and O's of the training and rehab, right? What do you think was like one key experience that y'all had as a group that really shaped and helped you guys move forward to better manage the team dynamics?
Yeah, no, a good one. I mean, this means a ton to me. The group I work with is the reason that I still do what I do. Like I love working in sport. I love baseball and all, but like the crew that I'm with, that's what I love about my job. You know, there's not one. It's such, I can't even explain it. The trust that we have with our group and the team first approach. It almost sounds like generic. Like this is like cliche. It's so cliche of the way I describe it, but it's the ultimate, like, set your ego aside. This is about a team. Every decision we make is a team, and it starts at the top. Like Ken, what he's developed, he talks about this thing called the law of the lid, where like if you have a leader that's kind of that's a level 6 leader, like the next guy is only going to get to that lid. He's only going to be a level 6 guy. Like when your leader's performing at a 10, it raises the game of everybody else. Like when I show up, Ken's already there. He's the hardest working guy in the whole group, and he doesn't have to be. He's actually probably the guy that could just sit back and let the whole team function because he's got it to a point where it does function on its own. Yet he's the one that's digging on things. He's the one that's still trying to every single day drive the culture, not only in our own team, but almost lead from the middle and push those things out to the coaching staff, push those things to the front office. Hey man, I notice your team is like super functional. You guys work really well together. There's no one that's like fighting each other, and like the coaches are intrigued by it. The players are intrigued by it, and it starts to almost move. It's really rare that you can lead from the middle. And that's something that I think is like started to happen in our organization, which is really cool. It's really special. Like, but it's founded out of trust. Like I can go to work and I know like trust, like I can do whatever I want. And I know that guy's got my back because he trusts me and I trust him. And he's like, I know that what you're doing is for the right intention. And if I see something stupid, I'm going to step in. And if he tells me it's stupid, I trust him. And I can be like, cool, I understand why. And we can have those open communications. But how did that start? Like, that's not easy to do. Everybody wants to be a high performer, wants to work at a high level. You have a lot of high performers that work with you, but how do you kind of fall in line, you know? And I think that everyone senses the trust and the love, and they really understand, like, this guy's out for me. Like, a lot of people are competing against their teammates. Say a minor league guy, come into the minor leagues in professional baseball. Like, I'm trying to work against maybe this other trainer to get up to the major leagues, right? Or work against his strength coach to like be ahead of him. But in reality, like we've had guys like not take promotions with other organizations because like, man, I know my development is going to improve not only as a clinician or as a coach, but also as a person, and my ability to be a leader and communicate with players and just live a happier, more fulfilling life if I stay here. And it's like, because they know that they got their back and their best interest at hand, you know, and like any opportunity that we've had to get a guy promotion, we've always given it to him. We're not trying to hold people down at certain levels to keep our team better, because we know the culture is going to take care of that. People are going to step into our culture, and it's going to help change them. That's when the culture is changing the individuals that join it. That's when you know you got something pretty strong. But that comes from everybody that's kind of formed this thing. I mean, Ken, Nate, Ryan, everyone has put in the work, and they consistently do it. It's not just a voice. Like the video matches the audio. What you hear and all these things, you can come on and talk about whatever you want, right? But when you actually the actions show that, I'm like, that's pretty special, you know. And that's really where it becomes like something that takes shape. Like some of the experiences, for example, like we'll do a group evaluations every year where after spring training you get a list of all the way through the minor leagues, all your teammates. Here's a list: strengths, weaknesses, comments, right? And like it's really hard for people to evaluate someone and be honest with them and give them good constructive feedback. And we're like, this is what you're good at, this is what you're bad at, these are my comments, and how maybe these are some strategies that you could do to change this. And so we get that, and we go over them with everybody, and we sit there face to face on a Zoom call if they're not around. We're like, this is what I think. And it's like some of it's kind of tough to hear, but it exposes you to the areas of your life or the ways that you're coming off that they're blind spots to you, you know, like the things that you didn't know that you don't know, like they're exposed to you, and you're like, holy cow, I'm coming off like that. Like I'm coming off like an egomaniac that wants to control everything. Man, I need to change that, you know? And so like when you hear it once or twice out of 30, it's probably nothing. It's just a bad incident that you had with somebody. But when you're seeing it like 8, 9, 10 times show up, it's probably true. And so like that's one of the things that we've done to build the culture and just like develop that honesty and like the ability to tell someone like, hey man, you're off today. Like I can honestly go to you and be like, cool. And it's not like, you know, oh, I'm all defensive now. It's like, I know that person loves me and cares about me. And I'm like, all right, thanks. Check, I got you. You know, we're back on track. So I don't even know. Sometimes I look at it and I'm like, how did this even like take shape? Like you have to have the right people in place that could drive that train, but not an easy thing. I think a lot of people try to emulate it, and it's really tough, but super special and super fortunate to be part of it.
It sounds almost like a fantasy.
Yeah, it is.
You know, like I'm hearing you talk over here, but like I know, like when you said like, hey, the audio matches the video, like I know firsthand from your group, like that is true and it exists. Like I will validate that, and I'm just always curious when you have successful groups like that, because I think that's the fallout of just any team in general, right? Like you can talk about a sports team, but like specifically to us, like the performance and health and performance group. I've seen like you hear these almost like quote unquote superstar health and performance teams, like they bring in this clinician, they bring in this name, they bring in this international expert, and they bring in this guy, and then all of a sudden it blows up in his face 3 years later.
Yep.
Right? And I think it's almost like the are you familiar with like the soccer at all? Like
Somewhat.
Soccer. So like Real Madrid back in the early 2000s, they called it the Galacticos. They brought in the world's best players on one team.
Right.
And they fell on their face. Like they just didn't, like they won some cups, but with the talent they had on that team, they should have won every game by 10 goals, should have won every cup.
Right.
And like I use that as an analogy in my head to remind myself, I think what's often missed is like the interdynamics, right? Like how is the interactions going to influence the overall team rather than just bringing in, let's just bring in the best of the best and, oh, it's going to work, you know? And it rarely does unless you're intentional with it.
Yeah. The sum of the parts, like, I mean, that's really where the power comes in. Like, the cool thing is I don't need to be the best physical therapist on any day because if I'm not as good with like running mechanics, I can send him out to Scott, our assistant strength coach, because I know he's great with running mechanics and he's going to clean them up. And I'm like, cool, the combo of that's a pretty good clinician. Or the combo of everybody working together beats any one clinician, any one superstar that wants to keep everything to himself and work in the corner and not see anything, you know, like you see it in sport happen, like you explained, like Real Madrid, all the best players, like the best teams are the ones that have cultures that have different personalities and different strengths. And so like all the teams that win, like they always hear that's, oh, they had a great clubhouse. Like they could get along, they hung out together, they laughed. They had a guy that was a comedian. They had a couple stars, a couple guys that filled in, a couple role players, you know, a good bullpen. Like you see the interaction, the dynamics of successful teams, and they come in all shapes and sizes. And it's like, it's not always the most talented team or the most talented player that wins, man. It's the summation of that. And that's something that we all desire to be part of. I think that's the next frontier in sport. Like it's something, we're in the world of like measuring everything. You know, we want to look at analytics, we want to look at pitch plots and movement profiles and whatnot. And like, really, like everyone's doing that now. So like, is it really an edge when everyone has that capability? You know, back when it was Moneyball era and the Oakland A's were doing that, it was different than everyone, so it was an edge. Well, now everyone's doing it, so it's not an edge. So how do you counter that? Well, to me, it's like culture. That's the next frontier, but it's the hardest thing to build because it's not a numbers game. It's not a math problem. It's the human factor. You know, we joke like the front office. The front office doesn't know what you do. Like a lot of them are, and they're brilliant. They're brilliant. A lot of them are like Ivy League educated. But they're analytics guys. They understand math problems. They want clear-cut answers to things sometimes. And the human element sometimes doesn't give you it's not a clear-cut answer. Like, how long is this going to take? I don't know. I really don't know. You know, and sometimes it's tough to take. But like back to building a team, like it's the same way. It's not a math problem. It's not like this clear-cut thing. There's like some magic that goes into like putting the right combination of people together that can interact and stay interwoven and stay in communication and work as a unit. And that's the beauty, man. That's where the magic happens, I think.
It definitely is where the magic happens.
Yeah. You saw, I mean, you guys had some success last year. I'm sure there was some team dynamics that like, and it's like you almost have similar teams, but in a different year. So there's something that's not clicking or it just, I don't know.
I would say this, like we had one particular player last year, every pregame, man, like he got the whole training staff and docs and some of our front office personnel that are down in the locker room, like his huddle that he did with the team going out to the pregame, like everybody felt that energy. And then unfortunately that player wasn't with us this year. And I remember like distinctively this year, game one, I'm like, oh, what's the pregame huddle going to look like in the hallway? And like just the energy wasn't there.
Right.
You know, it's like to your point, like I'm not saying that's like what led to success, but like those are the things that you can feel that you can't measure.
Right.
And like those are the only things that you see from behind. And it's like when you see those things, you realize, man, like it's not just, like you said, it's not just the numbers. It's not just the objective. Numbers and objective are simple and safe. The gray space and the art of it is what's dangerous and scary, right? That's the tough part of trying to figure this space out.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the thought that comes to mind, which is always a funny topic to talk about with other people in other organizations, is like, what's your judge on, right? Because like our space, it's very, very gray. Like, oh, guys are going to get hurt. Guys are going to get hurt. You're going to have to do rehab. How do you approach that question?
I mean, what question specifically?
How do you approach the question of how you are judged on if you are successful or not in your space?
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, like we get judged. We're judged by people that don't know what you do. Like your boss isn't a clinician, isn't a coach, right? Like you're judged from a front office, and sometimes winning can solve everything for one. When you're not winning, it's like, well, why aren't we winning? What's going on? Oh, we had some injuries this year. Why do we have injuries? And no one really understands the mechanics of what we talk about, right? From a when we want to talk shop, like you can't talk shop with your front office. So they judge you on like little ways that you communicate. Oh, they answered my text on time. Oh, they waited 5 hours to answer my text. This guy's not very good. Like, but when it's funny, like just the perception that you can give off when I can take care. Oh, my wife needs a doctor's appointment. Done. What's going on with this player? Having thought that out ahead of time and like, okay, I was thinking this for his rehab progression. We're going to go to this affiliate. We're going to throw 5 innings and we're going to throw 7 innings in Reno. And then we're thinking maybe one more if we get to, like having that thought out ahead of time so that when you get that question asked, it's there. Like showing that you're prepared, the perception that you have everything under control, the timeliness, the ability to talk, the ability to be a human, like those are the things you're judged on, which is kind of funny because it has nothing to do with really the clinical elements of what you do. That's what they judge you on. So it's tricky. I mean, I do think there's if you're having some significant issues from an injury element, I mean, there's a lot of luck that goes into that. There's a lot of pieces to the puzzle, but when you're just trying to grade a staff based on injuries, it gets tricky. And you want to go back in time and be like, all right, what happened there? Let's go back and see, could we have controlled that better? And you want to be honest with yourself, and that's important to do that. But I think really what you get judged on are the little things that have nothing to do with what you do.
Which probably leads you to like I think we could both say we probably know some lifers that exist in the pro sports world.
Sure.
And it's probably those things that you just referred to that allowed them to be successful. Now, by all means, don't be ignorant in with the clinical side of things and do no harm.
Right.
But to your point earlier as well, is sometimes being great in this space or being probably just great at anything requires more than just the X's and O's. It requires to kind of manage the chaos that's going on around you and also have an awareness to those things like you just said. Hey, like, oh, my GM just called me. I'm having dinner with my wife. Hey, babe, can I step out and take this call real quick? Like, kind of like the word that comes to mind is like availability too, right? And urgency and initiative are the things that I would say I see in myself, but I'm hearing you say at the same time based on some examples you used.
Yeah, you have to be. I think if you don't have that or you're not willing to sacrifice some of that, you're not going to last very long in pro sport because those things come at you hot. Like, and I don't have to deal with a lot of it. Like I get a pass because we have people that have the 2 phones hooked to the ears all the time in Ryan and Ken, and they handle a lot of the action that's coming at them on a constant. They're getting the phone calls at 2 a.m. Trying to, hey, my wife's sick, she's throwing her, what should I do? It's like the ability to watch them handle that stuff and see like what it's done for us is the trust that we've gained as a group is directly related to their capabilities to handle that stuff in a prompt manner, and the responsibility that they've taken on and the sacrifice that they've made to be like, no, this is important because this is how our team's judged. Like they're little things, just being available, just being in the off season when it's November 3rd and there's nothing going on at the complex, and you go in and Ken's in there looking at hitting evaluations or calling somebody about running mechanics or doing a Zoom meeting. You're like, what are you doing? It's like, that's what he does, that's what he signed up for, and he's there kind of driving the train, but he's available. So if our front office comes out and has a question, he's there. I'm like, man, you always got it covered. And there's always a perception that it's not false. I mean, it's not a facade, it's legit. It does have it covered. But like, I think that the perception goes really far with the way that you show up and the way that you handle those little details that have nothing to do with our job, or what we think is our job. Because our job can take on a lot of heads.
No, you're absolutely right. And like, shout out Ken Crenshaw. We've said your name Ken a lot, but just for the listeners, it's Ken Crenshaw. Yeah. He's an OG. And he's one of the real ones that's out there.
He's special.
He's taught us a lot. Getting like as we think about the success that we do have in this space. And baseball, y'all have 162 games. Currently where I'm at in basketball, we have 82 games. A lot of travel, a lot of months on the road, just a lot that goes into it. Like you said, endure the grind or embrace the grind, I think was the phrase you said. All right, within that, like, you have the team that wins, and then you have like us trying to find our wins along the way, right? How are you, let's just use like you yourself, right? I'm sure there's days where you're exhausted. I'm sure there are times where like, man, I just need to put my head down on the pillow, but I got to go into a game. Right, how are you finding your wins to keep you going?
That's a great question. It's important too, because like you said, you don't have normalcy. You know, you don't have, you're gone every day. You're in different cities. You're waking up at different times. I think number one, you can set yourself up for really good or really bad habits with that schedule and that monotony of every day, you know, going to the park every single day. So for me, I on a personal level, I need to do something I need something to dive into that I can try to gain deeper understanding of, whether that's studying something, reading something, a book, whether it's something that has nothing to do with work, like, you know, playing guitar, some type of skill, something that I'm trying to get into, a hobby of some kind, whether it's that or learning how to cook. It could be anything. I think having those things outside the game are very important to keep you balanced somewhat, because this is not balanced. This game is not balanced. Like, we joke, like, professional sports, like, oh, you work in sports, that must be such a healthy environment. I'm like, professional sports couldn't be a less healthy environment. Like, it's not good for you. Being a professional athlete is not healthy for you. The sleep, the travel demands, and that. So being able to establish habits like that are important, both mentally and physically. And then, like, small wins, I think you have to break this up and, like, finding little victories in the training room or projects to me to work on that I can get something from. Like, even if our team, like, we've had a couple tough seasons, like we had in 2021, very tough season. So it was like, man, like, how do we keep ourselves going first so that we can be there for our players? And it's like finding little victories where a player comes in. A good example is, we had a first baseman that comes in. Felt like he was pulling off anything. Any guys were trying to pitch him inside a lot, right? And so he's like, I feel like I'm losing my direction. I'm pulling off everything. I can't keep anything fair down the line. So, like, I don't want to get too technical with this. I know that's not where you want to go with it, but, like, going after his rib cage, teaching him how to rotate inside of his scaps, giving him some posterior expansion in his cage, and, like, his ability to stay on pitches inside and keep his direction, right? Goes out, hits 2 homers right down the line, pulls 2 in Colorado one night. Down the line, he's like, man, comes in after, he's like, I would not have kept those balls fair, you know, any other time. He's like, I think what we're going after is really helping. I'm like, awesome, little victory. You feel like you help something out. You get some, like, little juice going, like, oh, we're making some strides here. That's a small victory. It happens. The problem is, like, 2 games later, he goes 0 for 4. He's like, I'm not doing that anymore. And so it's just the reality of what we do. Like, so much of it's based on performance and that guy's ability to have success. And you're kind of like, hope he's good tonight, you know. Yeah. But you have those little victories. Like, I'm not here trying to promote anything that we did, but it was like cool. You have some success in that. You feel like you can help out a little bit here and there, even whether you're winning or losing. Some of that's out of your control. But you take on kind of the mentality of the team. You almost, like, go down with the ship when you're having a bad season. So, like, the ability to separate yourself from that, not make your identity wrapped up in what the team is doing, but at the same time, you don't want to disconnect from it, you know. So I think finding those small victories, whether it's in the training room, whether it's even just like a small talk with a guy. Like, I think we spend so much time with our players. The training room's a weird place because you get, like, the real version of players, right? They're not trying to be someone for their coaching staff or for the fans when they're out on the field. You see them when they're at their lows. You see them at their highs. You see them interact. You see them let their guard down. You see them come in and just get away from the media. That's, like, their safe place. And so, like, you get to know guys really, really well there. And so having talks and, like, being able to have a real talk with somebody and being able to, man, like, either a motivational talk or just, like, listen to them. Or, like, you struggling? What's going on, man? I see it in your face. Like, what's happening? Like, when you can build those and, like, have those little things, and sometimes it's nothing earth-shattering, but it's like, yeah, thanks for talking, man. Like, sometimes they just feel heard, or they just want someone to bounce something off of, like, being there for people. Like, those are small victories. They mean nothing. Like, no one ever sees that stuff, but those things are huge. Even if it's just somebody like, man, I had the if the one of the ticket ushers or somebody has a problem, it's like being able to help them out or put them in the right hands and find a doctor's appointment or something. It's like little things like that. They all can be perceived as victories, you know. And you have to find that stuff, because that it will eat you alive if you're just trying to rely on wins and losses going through a long season day after day. So I don't know if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, but. No, for sure. Because, like, what you're talking about, just it's so much of what makes people tick. Right, and it's so much of, like, behind the flashing lights, like, what really is going on. And like you said, sometimes that training room is that weird space. It's that weird space, especially if they're symptomatic, they have an injury. Like, you're catching them at their most vulnerable points at times, right? And you really can see that, and it's having an awareness to that and appreciation for that. Like I think you alluded to, like the way having this conversation, just like I see you, I hear you, like I'm here for you, right? Some of that stuff helps. Like find those small wins, and then hopefully it just snowballs down the road to something bigger and bigger and bigger. But also keep a positive mindset at the same time.
Right. Yeah, it's funny. I grew up like my mom was a hairdresser her whole life. Like her gift of talking to people, it had nothing to do with cutting hair, but people returned because she could do that. She could get close with them and form in relationships with people. That's really what this is. It's all just based on relationships. Like everything we've alluded to comes down to that.
I mean,
comes down to relationships.
Yes. One question I'm curious about, because I've like some context here. Like when I was working in soccer, we went on some losing streaks.
Right.
And in soccer, like you lose 4 games, that's a month. Like you don't win a game for a month. In basketball, you lose, 5-6 games in a row. Maybe it's 2 weeks, right? Baseball, if you go on some streaks, right, it could be several weeks, could be several days, even maybe a month, right? How do in the context of baseball and like your experiences, how do y'all endure those tough times?
Oh man, that's a good one. I don't know. I wish I knew how to get out of those messes earlier. You get in a bad one, it's like, oh, nothing goes right? You're almost like waiting for it to happen. Like, no, we're gonna blow this one. Oh no. But I've seen everything. I mean, I've seen guys come in hooking their bat up to like the art machine. I've seen guys come in burning incense through the clubhouse, like trying to get the evil demons out. I've seen guys change their underwear, maybe play with no underwear, play like we got songs, we're trying to switch up. You got like playing like little kids, children's songs, like anything that throws off the rhythm of the day, just because it feels, every day starts to feel the same. You're like, here we go. We came in, we ate lunch, we went out, took BP. It's like something to try to throw that off is huge. But baseball's funny. We joke because like making changes in baseball is like, it's like turning a cruise ship. Like it's slow. Like changes. There's so much just like superstition and history, and like it's rooted in the game that like people are hesitant to make changes. So like we joke, we're like, maybe we just shouldn't take batting practice today. Is this really helping us? Is it really helping us? Like maybe let's not do that. Let's show up to the field an hour before the game and play it like American Legion game. Like something that's just different, because you get into the lull and every day starts to feel, oh, this is the field. This is what happens. And now you come in, oh, here it is, the 7th inning, and we're going to blow a lead, and it happened. Like I don't know. I can't explain it. It's I've seen everything work, and I don't really have the answer for that, how you endure that. But sometimes it's like a little comic relief, and like literally getting away from the game, I think helps. And back to your question, like addition by subtraction, sometimes it is like we've had players that are so in their head about hitting they like pretty much sleep with their bat. Like they're so, baseball's on their mind all the time. I'm like, why don't you go play golf? Go play golf in the morning and don't even think about baseball, or something that has nothing to do with baseball. Like, why don't you do that to start the day? Or it's where it helps to have a comedian in the clubhouse or somebody that can mix it up a little bit. But
I have to run it back real quick, like about 2 minutes ago, because you're talking about all these superstitious ritual that these guys may try, and you casually just dropped, and I don't think everyone knows what this is. A player once hooked up a bat to the art wave. Oh, yeah. Can you please explain this?
Yeah. I think that they were looking for something. Like he literally had his bat.
What is the art
so
wave?
It's basically like old school Russian stem in a sense. Hooked him up to an ARP wave machine and pretty much hooked the electrodes to the bat. Put his batting gloves in there. Maybe even had a heat pack around it as well. It was like trying to give treatment to his bats. There's so much superstition in this game that. We've had players that would change their shoes in between innings, like every inning, new pair of spikes. It was like there's so much that gets wrapped up in like what they do. It's like, well, yesterday I ate cold pizza for breakfast, so I have to eat that again. There's so much of that goes on. It starts to leak into our room. It's like, hey, yeah, yesterday you worked on my neck and I got 2 hits. Like, can you do that again? You're like, you don't need that today. But it's like they think that that's the reason for success, and it's funny what you'll tie to either something good or bad and why it happened.
Oh, that's
but
fascinating.
No, it's the world of that. Baseball it's
someone. I feel like Ken has to write a book about all those like nuances of
man.
Like, here are the 80s, here are the 90s.
He says that all the time. He's like, if I only had a book, it would. He couldn't say everything, but it would be magic. It would be a beauty.
Oh, it would be incredibly entertaining. I'd be the first in line to buy that book.
Yes, the stories are good. There's a bunch of them.
We always joke too, like even like equipment managers. Like equipment managers should write a book. Like every equipment manager should just like have a book deal before they start their jobs. Like, hey, you're gonna hear some stuff and see some stuff. Like just start keeping a journal, keeping a daily journal, because the stories some of the equipment managers have, like you have a beer with them on the road, you're like, oh man, like, yeah, back in the 90s, this player was in and he used to do this, and I'm like, you just start rolling laughing. You're like, this is incredible. This is absolute gold. Like this belongs on a Netflix show or something like those. It's just fun to be in that space because that stuff does happen. And like, you're always curious, like other sports, like what are the quirks about baseball? Like you just hit on, like the fact that a guy was giving treatment to a baseball bat just is hysterical. Yet also, like my wife, like I think both of our wives work in the mental health space. They'd be like, I just don't know if that's healthy at the same time.
It's definitely not healthy. No, not at all.
Last one I got for you, kind of wrap things up here. You've been a phenomenal man. This has been entertaining at it. You've had me rolling laughing over here a few times. It's been great. The people that may be listening that are looking to get into this space, right? To this space or just in life in general. Like you have great experience being around some of the best athletes within the world of baseball. At least you call them players. I know you said not throwing out all athletes, right? But being around some of
pitchers,
being around some of the best there, and then also yourself recognizing your own talent, right? Someone that wants, those two questions. Someone that wants to get into this space, what advice do you have for them?
As a sports medicine
sports medicine practitioner, performance practitioner.
Yeah, I think that number one is like doing it not for the logo that's on your shirt and not for yourself. It's really hard to truly like put that aside because it's cool. Like you want to, oh cool, I'm working in professional sports. Like a lot of people are tied to that, or they're a fanboy or fangirl. They want to get into sports for that reason, or to try to promote themselves, and I think that one thing you're going to have to get over quick is you have to get over yourself first. So it's got to be you have to have a definite interest in the team element of it and sharing the responsibilities with a group. But as far as like getting in advice to get in, once I think you need that as a foundation. And then two, I think you need to spend some time, like reach out to practitioners, try to like always like hitters. I'm like, for pitchers, like watch what do the best pitchers do. Like let's study those guys. It's in any realm. Like what are the best of any job, whatever they do, what do they do, and then emulate them, right? So a lot of it is like, well, call people, email them. There's so much access to people in those positions right now in professional sports that through like emails, through whatever it is, LinkedIn, social media, you can get in connection with people. And sometimes I think people are afraid to do that. And it's like, you'd be surprised how many people are like, sure, come on in, we'll hook you up, come in for a day, and hang out and really get a sense in who they are. And it's kind of a first meet and greet to get in the network. I think if you can find an internship, there's a lot of internships through PBATS and which is the Pro Baseball Athletic Trainer Society. For trainers, I think we're starting to get a little bit more of that with physical therapy through like for clinical internships. A lot of teams have developed the internship programs to get interns in the door, and the S&C side works kind of the same. But I think reaching out, you'd be surprised at how many people would open the door and at least talk with you and give you some advice. Hey, how did you do this? What are the right steps I should take? Like I think when we have people come in, I'm more intrigued by somebody that just has a foundation and like has a work ethic and is genuinely interested in learning rather than coming in to try to impress you and explain what they know. That's always kind of a turn off to me. It's like, I understand like you're a young student. Like I don't expect you to have the answers, but our young clinicians that we bring into our system, they have good foundations. They're good people. They can communicate. They have a drive to learn. They're asking questions to genuinely learn, not to look like they are the one talking all the time. But, I think that stuff comes off really well. And reading, like diving into stuff outside of your typical schoolwork that you're doing. It's one of the questions I always like to ask. Like everyone always will get in like, well, hey, what do you want to get in? Well, I really want a situation where I want to learn. I want a mentorship and I want to learn. All right, well, what are you reading outside of your school? I don't know. It's like, I want people that are hungry. They're digging on stuff, that have thoughts, like I don't want to have surface level like Cliff's Notes knowledge on something. Like, have you dove down anywhere? Have you dove down a realm, or at least like developed a philosophy in what you think or a road you want to go down? Early on, I think like when I was in PT school, I was like frustrated with the basic orthopedic model that you're kind of taught in school, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna go pick up like I was introduced to like Shirley Sarman's work, and like someone that actually looked at like movement diagnoses as opposed to like an actual orthopedic diagnosis. Like, why are these things occurring? And it was just like an interest of mine outside of schoolwork that I wanted to dive down those roads, and then you take it to whatever movement approach you want, a DNS, a PRI, or whatever. Like have something you're interested in. Like, I just want to know that you've dove down some places and are intrigued by stuff, because you're going to burn out if you don't have that, or you don't have that driver. Like, I think you're going to get fried. So
that's a really great advice.
Yeah.
Like, you got it. When we go through our hiring process, same thing. I ask that same exact question. Hey, like, beyond what like, tell me something else. Hobbies, things you're interested in.
Yeah.
What books you're chewing on. What crazy thoughts have you had? I always think it's because those, like, you realize, like, those, it's not the fact that you are reading something outside is what we're concerned about, or the fact that you have a hobby. It's just saying to me, like, hey, like, you're more of a complete person than just this tunnel vision clinician that's coming into this space. Because you and I both know that tunnel vision clinician, they're good for a while, and then eventually, like you just said, they're going to burn out, or something's going to happen. They're moving on.
Mm-hmm.
The last one I have for you is kind of on a similar front, but like thinking about like health and performance, right? Because you've been exposed. Like, the beauty of being in pro sports is we get exposed and have access to a lot of resources, a lot of tech, a lot of smart people, a lot of people that just can share information, right? For the Gen Pop side of things, right? If they're trying to improve their health and performance, or they're embarking on something like that, where they're like, there's a magazine article that just came out and they want to embark on that. What advice do you have for those that are trying to make that upgrade for health and performance?
Yeah, good one. You can go a lot of ways with this. It's funny that right now there's so much information. There's so much little like fringe details when you talk like the biohacking world, right? And everyone's looking for this like magic bullet, and like, I'm gonna start doing. I don't want to bash any one specific thing, but you have like, I'm gonna do this certain type of coffee, and this is I'm gonna do this sauna followed by this cold plunge at 30 degrees and yada yada. I'm like, okay, great. These are like all these little niche fringe parts of wellness, but like people don't even do A and B well. Like, we'll have players come to us, hey, what do you think of bulletproof coffee? And it's like, well, I don't know. Do you sleep? Do you drink enough water? Do you like? You're trying to dabble with like this level 10 stuff, and you don't even do level 1 and 2 well. That's a problem. And so this day and age, I think we're so inundated with all of this complex knowledge on things that people are looking for that cheat. And it's really like, it's the consistency and the foundational stuff that works. And that's in any realm. Like, the best hitters, you talk to like a Paul Goldschmidt, it's just like showing up every day, following your routine, and doing the work. The consistency is, I think, where the magic is. Like, doing the basics very well, even if it's like, one of the things that got me is like reading the book Atomic Habits. I remember like just setting your environment up to succeed. Like, the first thing, instead of like having a habit of waking up, getting the coffee and pulling out your iPhone, wake up, have your coffee, and put your gym clothes on. And just the habit of putting the clothes on, you don't even have the thought of going to the gym yet, but like, oh, I already got my clothes on, maybe I should go to the gym. Or they make it such like an easier task to perform the next step.